Hey everyone, it's Emily, and today I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the books that I read in the month of April. So I read 5 things in the month of April, and 3 of them I have physically, 2 of them I read on audiobook. I will not be editing in a picture of the ones that I read on audio because I film and edit these on my phone, and just makes it slightly more complicated, and I want to make this editing as easy and quick on myself as possible. I will link everything below. I promise it'll all be there. I'll talk about them, but I'm not going to have the picture up because I need to edit these quickly. Anyway, so without further ado, let's talk about the books. So the first book I read in the month of April was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I read this with a dear friend of mine from undergrad. She is one of the friends that has always just been one of my best book buddies. We both love reading and love reading the same kind of books, and so I had been a little bit hesitant about this one just because I had read such mixed things about it. But when she said, "No, you're gonna love it," I picked it up and indeed loved it. So if you don't know what this one's about, this one follows our main character, April May, and she lives in New York City, and on her way home from work very late one night, she comes across a strange statue-like thing just in the middle of New York City. And she contacts one of her friends, and they kind of make this silly little video where she interviews this statue, and they post it on YouTube. And she didn't realize that when this statue appeared in New York City, equivalent statues appeared in cities across the world. And so she quickly becomes famous, internet famous, for these videos where she talks about Carl and talks to Carl, as she begins to call the statue. And so she kind of becomes this just ambassador, essentially, this unofficial ambassador to the Carls, and knowledgeable and the face of everything to do with these statues. You know, what are they? How did they get here? Are they an alien species coming to contact us? And as soon as these statues appear, some weird things start happening, and so she's trying to figure out this mystery and figure out what to do, why the Carls are here, and kind of figure out her place in all of it and how she deals with being internet famous and just kind of the backlash that comes with that. And it's a really fascinating commentary on internet culture, on celebrity culture. Hank Green obviously is a YouTuber, so I feel like it's coming from a very personal place, and you can tell that it is a very personal project for him. And I love the characters. I don't say love in that the characters are just the greatest people ever. April May is not a perfect character, but I think he does a really great job with this imperfect character and how she's dealing with her situation. Maybe not the best way ever, but kind of becomes what she thinks is the best thing in the moment for various reasons. And one of the things that I think is most interesting about this book is that it is told in first person past tense. So it's like she's chilling on the couch with you, just like telling you about this crazy thing that happened to her. And she's older and wiser when she's telling the story. And so she can look back and just kind of make fun of herself a bit and say, so I know this wasn't the best move, but this is what I did, this is why I did it. And you can kind of get a sense of who she is and why she makes the decisions that she does, and go from there. And I just, the commentary in this was super interesting. I just wanted to keep figuring out what happened next, and just wanted to keep turning the page. I could barely put this down, and it was thoroughly entertaining. It was hilarious, and there's a female president in it, which is always fun. So yeah, would highly recommend. It's light sci-fi, so if you're kind of wanting to figure out if you like sci-fi or wanting to dip your toes in sci-fi, but generally read contemporary, this could honestly be a really cool start, because there are sci-fi elements, but it's primarily a contemporary story. So yeah, a lot of fun. And the next book I read was for a feminist book club, and that is Paradise by Toni Morrison. This is one of the books I listened to on audio, and maybe I need to physically read it to have a different opinion, but I was not a fan of this book, and she narrated the audiobook, and I think she did a fantastic job narrating her book. And it follows a town called Ruby, and it follows a bunch of different people. So it's set a while ago, and it's kind of this fictional town where African Americans have kind of come together to kind of overcome the struggles that they've been through. And so the story is kind of told from the perspective of some of the different people who end up coming to this town, and their stories, why they were traveling to Ruby, or how they made their way to Ruby, their relationship with the other people in the town, their relationship with this convent that's on the outskirts of town. And I just was mostly, to be honest, confused throughout a lot of the audiobook, because you're jumping around from so many different characters' perspectives and kind of their relationships and their stories and everyone that's connected with their world. You're following a bunch of different people, and it's not very long that you follow each individual perspective, and so you don't get to know the characters very well or for very long before you're thrown into another story, and like they kind of sort of intersect in different ways. And the writing style was very lyrical, which at times was really beautiful, but also at times just really confusing, because I would have to re-listen to different parts of the audiobook, and I sometimes still couldn't figure out, why is this character doing that? Who is this character? Like, how do we know them again? And so I ultimately just couldn't really connect with or care about a lot of these characters' stories. Well, not that I didn't care about the characters, but it was really kind of hard to put yourself in their shoes, and it was kind of really hard to follow what was going on for more portions of the book than I would have liked. And so ultimately I just kind of found even just like a lot of the little details of this, and even some of the major overarching stories, just really confusingly told. So overall, I didn't enjoy this book too much, but yeah. So I guess I should give star ratings, shouldn't I? Maybe? I have a weird feeling about star ratings, so I feel like it's just kind of subjective, and everyone's going to kind of give star ratings a different way, and it could definitely shift depending on how long it's been since you've read the book. Are you giving it that rating right after you read it, or after a while when you've thought about it? I don't know. I feel weird about kind of giving number ratings, especially since I know there might be like 4-star books that both are 4 stars for me, but I definitely liked one more than the other, but I definitely liked that one more than this other book that I guess I kind of put it at 3.5 stars or something. I don't know, it's kind of weird. So take the numbers with a grain of salt, but I gave An Absolute Remarkable Thing 4.5 stars, and I think I'd probably give Paradise 2 stars. So the next book that I read in the month of April, I also listened to an audiobook, and that was The Princess Saves Herself in This One, and it is narrated by the poet Amanda Lovelace, and I loved this. I thought it was awesome. It's really raw, it's gorgeous, it's so real, and you can just feel all the emotion that she was going through while writing it, and it's about her struggles. It's about her life. It's about, abuse, sexual assault, just a lot of different things. And so definitely heavy trigger warnings for that. And it's just, it's so gorgeous. Would recommend. I really want to pick up the next 2. She kind of has a series of 3 poetry collections that are interrelated, and I want to read the second one. But the first one was on Scribd, so I figured it would be a good way to kind of introduce me to her poetry and see if I connected with it, if I liked it, and I did. So I would love to pick up the next 2, and I believe those are The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, and The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one. So I would love to pick those up. Okay. The next book I read in the month of April was Sight by Neal Shusterman. I read this for the Bookmarked Book Club, and oh my god, I love this book. This book was incredible. I would honestly probably give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Loved it. So this book follows a world where essentially people have conquered mortality, and people don't necessarily really die by natural causes, but we still have a finite amount of resources, and so there are a group of people called scythes who are the ones who are sanctioned by society to glean or kill people to keep the population in check. And this book follows two apprentices to a scythe and kind of follows their training and kind of follows the politics of the scythe world, and it's a fascinating book. And there's a lot that I could say about this. I could probably have an entire dedicated review to this one. I thought the world was fascinating. It also kind of has an AI element where everyone but the scythes kind of are connected to this AI intelligence, and the scythes kind of have access to part of it, but there is a strict separation between, it's called the Thunderhead, and scythe. And so yeah, it follows these two apprentices during their training and the lessons they learn and their struggles, and there's kind of a mystery that's at the core of this book that deals with scythe politics, and so it's these apprentices trying to figure out this mystery. And I knocked off a half star in part because there were tiny elements of this book that I thought were a little bit either inconsistent or I was a little bit confused about. So they've conquered death, and there are kind of these little nanites that are kind of integrated into your body that help heal you and can kind of help manage pain, and that's part of why we've conquered mortality in this world, is because that kind of technology has been developed. So we're apparently at a place where no one can die by a natural cause or a death, but like fire is kind of randomly introduced as one way that people can die by natural causes, despite the fact that things that, if fire can kill you, I think there are other things that happen in this book that would probably be even more difficult for your cells and the nanites to recover from. So I don't know, and there were a few things about the politics of the world that I was just trying to follow through the entire book and make sure that everything was consistent throughout the book. And I'm kind of nitpicking at that point, but it was such an enjoyable book. It was quite a ride, and I could barely put this book down. So would recommend. So the final book that I read in April was also a book I thoroughly enjoyed. I overall had a really good reading month, and that was Truth Witch by Susan Dennard, and this is the first book in the Witchlands series, and this book follows the Truth Witch, and that's Safia, and Safi is just such a badass character. I love her. And Iseult is also a central character in this story, and she's what's called a thread witch. And a truth witch can tell when someone is being truthful or not. And a thread witch kind of can see the connections between people. It's a little bit hard to describe, and it can also kind of be a little bit confusing in this book, but a thread witch can kind of see the ties between people. And so Iseult and Safia are what are called thread sisters, and I love the bond between these two. The best thing about this book, honestly, was the relationship between these two thread sisters and two thread brothers who are part of the story. So even though Safia is a truth witch, not many people know that that is one of her powers. She doesn't want to become involved in any of the politics that's going on in her world, and she knew that if any of the leaders knew that she was a truth witch, that they would basically fight over control of her so that they could use her power to further their kingdom's politics. And so there's been a truce in this world. I think it's a 20-year truce that is coming to an end soon, and so there needs to be either a renegotiation, and things are really tense. So certain people have found out about Safia being a truth witch, and so certain people are trying to protect her, certain people are trying to control her, and so it's her adventures throughout this world, trying to figure out who to trust, who to not trust, and how she can outsmart other people, and ultimately what she needs to do to kind of figure out where she fits into this world and what her place is. But the best thing in this book is just the connection that she has with Iseult, and just the love that they have for one another and the lengths that they're willing to go to protect one another. It's just a beautiful story. I would probably give this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I think I would knock a little bit off only because there are a lot of parts where I feel like she kind of just dumps you into the world, and you definitely figure out a lot along the way, which is totally fine. I don't necessarily need an entire exposition and info dumping about a world at the beginning of the book, and then then the action can follow. I'm fine just kind of diving right into the action and figuring things out as you go. But I feel like there were a fair number of things that just weren't explained very well about the world, and you don't really figure it out as you go. And so there are a lot of references, a lot of just little things here and there. I'm like, that wasn't explained. I don't know what you're talking about. Like you haven't introduced that yet. So there were little things here and there that were a little bit more difficult to follow. I did listen to this on audiobook. I actually switched back and forth between the audiobook and the physical. And even reading it physically, I feel like so that's part of why I mentioned that, because I was wondering if at first it was because I listened to it on audio, did I miss something? But even the parts that I read physically, there were some things that she just kind of assumes and doesn't explain them, and doesn't explain the joke between two characters, or doesn't explain that reference. But still, thoroughly enjoyable book, 4 out of 5. Like, I will for sure be continuing in this series when I get a chance and picking up more of the books in this series that follow the perspective of some of the different characters as the story continues. And that's it for my April wrap-up. Let me know what you read in the month of April. What was your favorite book? Have you read any of these? If so, let me know. I will put my Twitter and Instagram down below. That's where I like to hang out on social media, so connect with me there. Also, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!